You're putting on a pretty good show.
A show?
Yeah, you're putting on a really good show.
A show?
Yeah.
How's this a show?
A mother lay dead in her own bed, an axe left beside her. The only other person inside that house was the son she rescued from an orphanage and raised as her own. He swore he slept through the entire thing, but over 9 weeks, detectives would peel back one lie after another until the truth surfaced from the bottom of a lake. This is 17-year-old Carlos Antonio Halliwell. Only hours before this interrogation, detectives had found his mother, Denise, dead inside her lakeside home. To everyone who knew him, Carlos seemed to have it all together. Polite, athletic, the picture of a well-raised kid. But the calm exterior was about to crack. It was 6:15 p.m. on July 13, 2019, when the Citrus County Sheriff's Office received a 911 call that would launch a homicide investigation.
911, what is the address of the emergency?
I need someone fast. I need EMTs. I need people.
Okay. All right, stay on the phone with me and take a deep breath and calm down so we can get this information. Okay.
I can't.
Do you think she's beyond any help?
I don't know.
The caller was Carlos himself. He told the dispatcher he'd just found his adoptive mother, 57-year-old Denise Lane Halliwell, dead inside their home on South Dodge Point Road in Inverness, Florida. What deputies walked into was straight out of a nightmare. Denise lay on her bed, an axe resting beside her, and it was immediately obvious how she had died. To understand who could do this, investigators first looked at Denise's life. She was a single mother who had herself been adopted as a child, and she'd spent her adult years giving that same gift to others, adopting 2 boys from Central America, Carlos from Guatemala and Angel from Honduras. Friends called her a forever mom, a woman who believed every child deserved a stable, loving home. Now that same woman was at the center of a murder case. There was only one person known to have been inside the house when she died, Carlos. His story was simple. He'd been asleep, and an intruder had somehow slipped in and killed her. But there were no broken windows, no forced locks, no sign anyone had entered from the outside. For 9 weeks, detectives gathered evidence, and everything kept circling back to the boys sleeping down the hall. Eventually, they brought him in, and the moment he began to talk, the contradictions started.
Hold on, Carlos. Hey. What are you hanging in there, man?
Just trying to accept the fact.
Once again, my name is Detective Ramos, Lieutenant Ball. So here's what everybody out here, and we're just trying to talk to you, see if you could, help us out and let us know what all took place.
Okay. My mother and I came back from the funeral, and we had lunch together. We had pie together, and the last time I saw her was around 2:30, 3. We both went to our separate rooms to take our naps for the day, which is what we normally do. And then about a couple hours later, I don't remember the time, I hear barking from my side of the house, which is abnormal. Our dogs are supposed to be in that little fenced-in area. So I walk out to the front door. My mom's door is closed as always, but she does let the dogs out every now and then while she's taking a nap to just let them go to the bathroom. So the front door was wide open. I figured she might have forgotten to close it. I looked outside. Our dog, the 2 green gates that you guys walk through, completely open. Every now and then my mom sometimes does that. She's getting older and she forgets things very easily now. She was. So went to go find the dogs, checked around the property, looking for them. I couldn't find them. So I went to go wake my mom up to help me find them, and then I found her there.
Carlos walked detectives through the rest of the day. He and Denise had driven back from a friend's funeral that morning, stopped for pie on the way home, a small tradition of theirs, and then split off to their own rooms for an afternoon nap. He said he'd fallen asleep after texting his girlfriend and a few friends about a job, and that nothing about the day had felt out of place. If anything, he insisted, it had been a good one.
So you was already awake when the dogs were barking?
No, that did wake me up. I fell back to sleep. I woke up after about a 2-hour nap. Played on my phone and fell back to sleep because my mom wasn't up yet. Usually when I hear her being up, then I go outside, but I didn't hear her up, so I'll just let her have her space.
So when you guys normally take spaces, do your naps, you guys don't talk to one another?
No, it's very common for us. We just like to have our own time throughout the day because we do bicker and argue when we spend too much time together. So we've learned how to cope with it and just give ourselves space, and we get along fine.
Did you guys bicker, argue anything today?
No, I think it was fine. completely normal day. In fact, it was a really good day. We got pie. That was a special treat. So that was good.
On its surface, the account held together: a nap, some barking dogs, a mother found too late. But the neighbors told only half the same story. Several of them did remember the dogs barking around the time of the murder, yet not one of them saw a stranger enter or leave the property. For detectives, that gap was easy to set aside for now. What interested them more was the relationship between Carlos and the mother he claimed to be so close to.
When was the last time you and your mom got into an argument?
A while ago. I couldn't even tell you when. We've been fine since I moved back into the house.
You moved out?
I did. For a period of time, my mom was really upset with me because I wasn't following the path of school and everything. So she told me if I didn't get my act together, she'd ask me to find somewhere else to live for a little bit until I got my stuff together. And then I eventually did.
When did you move out?
I don't remember. I really don't remember any of that time. I got expelled around right after Christmas time, January.
Did you get expelled or sent to Renaissance or?
Well, I got sent to Renaissance, but my mom and I declined it, and we just moved counties because it's professional courtesy.
Mm-hmm.
And the school just said, okay, if you're not going to go to Renaissance, we will expel you. So we took that chance.
Okay. What was going on?
I got caught with possession of like this much in my car, so no tolerance rule. I understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Carlos was around 15 when he was caught with marijuana in his car, but his troubles had started years before that. His drug use had become the central fault line between him and Denise, and by 2015, their home had settled into a rhythm of arguments and resentment. He struggled in school, drifted toward friends she couldn't stand, and pushed back against her hopes that he'd go to a 4-year college. He wanted a technical path instead. He would later claim she threatened to pull his tuition and belittled him during their fights, but when investigators dug into those accusations, they found almost nothing to back them up.
So you're saying things have gotten better between you two?
Yes, definitely. My mom and I have always had a very close bond, and a lot of people didn't really understand me and my mom, and we've been through a lot together. So, I mean, there's nothing I wouldn't do for her or anything. So, I just don't know what happened. I was completely confused. Doors were open. It was completely unusual, but her door was still closed. And then when I opened it,
What do you mean doors were open?
front door, and then the gates were completely open,
Mm-hmm.
which never supposed to be like that.
He leaned hard on the idea of open doors. 2 green gates that were always kept shut to hold the dogs in, he said, had somehow been left wide open, along with the front door. Both gates, both sides of the property. He admitted his mother sometimes forgot the front door, but never the side gates. To him, it all pointed to an intruder. To the detectives, it pointed somewhere else entirely.
You walked into your mom's room.
It was our axe in the side of my mom.
What would you guys be using the axe for?
We have a lot of trees that are down. We have a chainsaw, but sometimes it's not working, and then sometimes there's small trees. So we'll just hack them up and then throw them in the burn pile or just discard them inside of the woods.
Right. So was the last time you even used it?
Used it 2 days ago-ish. It was one of the days when it was raining really bad. We had a small tree fall down across the road. So my mom and I just hacked it up and threw it in the woods.
Your mom used it?
Yes.
And she used it that day, a couple days ago?
Think so. Maybe. I'm not sure.
Then came the machete. When a deputy noted that Carlos had admitted handling a blade that same day, he quickly clarified it wasn't the axe. It was a machete he kept in his room and liked to sharpen on weekends. It was a small correction, but it revealed something. Carlos was already thinking ahead, quietly building explanations for anything his hands might have touched. And that instinct wasn't lost on the detectives. Carlos was getting out in front of a problem before they could raise it. He explained that if his fingerprints turned up on the axe, it was only because he'd used it 2 days earlier to clear a fallen tree. But when investigators combed the heavily wooded lot, they found none of it. No freshly cut trees, no chopped wood, no burn pile, nothing to support a single word of it.
You have any problems out there where you need it for protection or anything?
We've had
pretty quiet out there.
We've had a couple intruders. So my mom likes to keep things private, which is why we have a lot of those signs that say surveillance or beware of dog and stuff like that.
You guys actually got surveillance up?
No.
Just like a scare tactic.
We have one camera on the side of the house that doesn't even work. It's just there.
He kept returning to the theme of outsiders. He described past scares, a neighbor once pulling a gun to sweep the property, someone years earlier carving a cross into a window screen. Isolated stories, none of them recent, none of them tied to anyone with a reason to hurt Denise.
So let's talk about your mom.
Yeah.
Obviously, you know, we're not looking at an accidental situation here, right?
No.
Somebody put an axe in the back of her head. Who would have done that?
I don't know anybody who would have done that. All my mom's close friends, anything would be people at church. This is the only people that I know.
She don't have any enemies?
Not that I know of. She
People that
kept to herself.
Pressed for a name, Carlos had nothing on his mother's side. Denise was private, guarded, kept mostly to church and to herself. But when detectives turned the question toward him, a name did surface. A young man Carlos said he'd fought with over a friend's soured drug deal. It was, he insisted, already squashed. The only visitors Denise ever allowed were his girlfriend and a few friends, and they even had to meet him at the gate. She didn't like anyone on her land, and with the property tucked so far off the road, hidden behind trees and backed by the lake, no outsider had any easy way in.
Story's changing as we keep going. It just keeps changing and changing. You went from
What's
you
changing?
talking about she went to you heard her.
Okay.
You say you went to your room.
I'm confused.
You say you went to your room.
Yes.
You closed your door.
Correct.
You heard your mom walk to her room and close her door.
Right. She was doing
And then
what
you
she
went to
normally
sleep.
does. Yes, she was doing what she normally does, and then I went to sleep.
So then how you know she came out and went back in?
That was before I went to sleep. I'm saying that I went to my room, closed my door, and I hear my mom doing what she normally does, goes to her room, and then she needs something, water. She usually gets water. Came out, got water. She went back to her room, never heard it up again. So I went to sleep.
So her room should have a cup of water in it?
I don't know if what she got. I don't know. I was in my room. So I have no idea. That's just her usual routine. This is going off of what she normally does. Her everyday thing.
Every detail he offered only tightened the circle around him. The back doors were keyed on both sides, locked from within, impossible to slip out of without a key that only he and his mother carried. He walked detectives through the afternoon in almost obsessive detail. Coming in first, his mother behind him, the pie eaten straight from the box, the dogs settled in the living room, the sound of her door closing as she went to nap. It was a portrait of a perfectly ordinary day, delivered with a precision that felt less like memory and more like rehearsal. From all of it, two things stood out to detectives. The first was that enemy Carlos had produced, the young man from the drug dispute. But that feud was with Carlos, not with Denise. Nobody had a reason to target his mother. The second was quieter and more telling. Nowhere in his own account had Carlos mentioned Denise watching television. It only appeared after a detective asked whether she'd been doing anything before she died, and suddenly the TV was on, set to sleep mode, just as she always liked it. Small details kept materializing exactly when they were needed, and the more he talked, the more his own timeline began to fold in on itself.
Story's changing as we keep going. It just keeps changing and changing. You went from
What's
she went.
changing?
You talking about she went to you heard her.
Okay.
You say you went to your room.
I'm confused.
You say you went to your room.
Yes.
You closed your door.
Correct.
You heard your mom walk to her room and close her door.
Right. She was doing
And then
what
you
she
went to
normally
sleep.
does. Yes, she was doing what she normally does, and then I went to sleep.
So then how you know she came out and went back in?
That was before I went to sleep. I'm saying that I went to my room, closed my door, and I hear my mom doing what she normally does, goes to her room, and then she needs something, water. She usually gets water. Came out, got water. She went back to her room, never heard it up again. So I went to sleep.
So her room should have a cup of water in it?
I don't know if what she got. I don't know. I was in my room. So I have no idea. That's just her usual routine. This is going off of what she normally does. Her everyday thing.
Pushed on it, Carlos fell back on the same defense again and again. Not what he'd actually heard, but what his mother normally did. The routine stood in for the memory. Sensing they'd gotten all they could for the moment, detectives stepped out for a short break. When they returned, Carlos volunteered a new subject on his own, one that would open a far darker window into who he was. He began talking, almost casually, about the cars he'd wrecked. His mother's prized 2007 4Runner, the first car she ever bought, sat damaged after he'd slid it into a tree on the trails. He brushed it off as an accident, the kind of thing that happens, but it was the truck before it that revealed what was really underneath.
How long have you been driving there?
Only a year. I used to drive a Ram 1500 red pickup truck.
What happened with that one?
I attempted to ran into a tree.
Oh, how long ago was that?
Somewhere when I was 16.
About a year?
Yeah.
What happened with that, man? Why?
I was in a bad place, a very bad place, and then my mom just didn't know what to do. She didn't know that I was in that place, and I just went for it.
What you've been doing differently since from then to now?
I'm on, I made another attempt, and then my mom finally...
When was the second attempt?
I couldn't even tell you. I know it's on file. I don't know the exact date.
What gets you to that point? Like what was going on during that time that made you?
I wasn't done recovering after what happened between my mom, my younger brother, and me. Even though it happened a while ago, it was just starting to come back up again.
That mention of his younger brother opened a chapter of the family's history that was disturbing all on its own. In September 2015, the Citrus County Sheriff's Office arrested Denise after Angel was found hiding in a neighbor's storage shed, telling deputies he hadn't been fed in 2 days. What investigators uncovered was a portrait of severe isolation. Denise admitted to locking Angel in his bedroom with an exterior padlock, its windows nailed shut and painted over, sealing him off from the outside world. The room held little more than a cot, an air mattress, and a bucket. Angel said he was forced to do chores and was struck as punishment. Carlos's room, by contrast, was full of toys, books, and game systems, even an Xbox. And when deputies questioned him back then, Carlos didn't just stay quiet. He defended Denise. He called Angel a liar and a troublemaker and insisted none of it was true. His words, along with support from Denise's colleagues at school, helped the state attorney's office drop the charges for lack of physical evidence. She avoided conviction, but it cost her everything. She lost her teaching job, her name in the community was ruined, and Angel was taken from the home for good and placed in foster care. Now, years later, with that history laid bare on the table, detectives leaned in, hoping the pressure might finally crack the story open.
Carlos, how often do you think it is that somebody's sitting in their house taking a nap or anything like that situation and some stranger comes in and kills them?
I don't know, but I will say this. I hope you're not insinuating I would do this. Because she adopted me from 4. She has been my mother, has been by my side.
What my inference is that rarely ever happens.
Okay.
That rarely ever happens, and what I'm trying to lead to is that 99.9% of the time, it's a family member or a close friend or
you don't know anybody
or a lover or something like that.
The only person, ex-lover is, I don't even know his first name, is Mr. Dave. It was her ex. She's had 2 marriages, both separated. I don't even know really who they are.
From there, the detective went at the story from every angle. He confronted Carlos with the neighbors who'd heard arguing that day. Carlos flatly denied it, insisting the whole day had been calm, but it was the dogs that trapped him. He had already explained they'd bark like crazy at any stranger who entered the house. So the detective pressed the obvious point. If an intruder had really come inside, the dogs would have gone wild. Yet Carlos claimed they'd simply wandered out through open gates without a sound. He twisted through the contradiction, arguing the dogs weren't near the door, that they'd have run off silently, that he couldn't possibly have moved them himself. And then, cornered, he turned the question back on the men across the table.
So I don't know what you guys are trying to get out of me right now, but I didn't do anything and would never do anything to my mother like that. As much as we used to bicker and get back at each other, fighting sometimes, and then peace, and then back and forth, and then peace again, never in a million years would I ever think to do that. She's my mom. I was adopted at age 4, and I've been with her forever.
Yeah.
Would never do such a thing like that. And if you're insinuating that, I'm very offended by that.
You're putting on a pretty good show.
A show?
Yeah, you're putting on a really good show.
A show?
Yeah.
How's this a show?
Because I remember the whole interviews with you back when all this went down.
You remember that?
Yeah, I was in charge of the major crimes unit then.
Okay.
So And I remember that CPT talking about how your attitude of things were very sociopathic.
Sociopathic.
Which is exactly what you're showing me right now. And you're trying to act like you're upset about something.
Trying?
Yeah.
Okay, how is this trying? That was my mom. My mother.
Yeah. Right.
So trying, how is this trying?
Because you don't feel like normal people feel.
I don't feel like normal people feel.
Yeah. That's what a sociopath has the issues with.
Okay,
But
so you're calling me a sociopath?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. This is what sociopaths do.
Well, do what?
I've just been sizing you up the whole time. And
Okay.
it's like 100%.
Okay, you can size me up.
You don't have normal feelings.
You can size me up all you want. I do have normal feelings.
Carlos held his ground, insisting he'd loved his mother and daring the detective to ask anyone in the county, but the interview had reached its limit. The detectives had learned enough, and they knew the evidence they needed wasn't in that room yet. Over the following weeks, they kept working, chasing down witnesses, examining the scene, and quietly building a case. Then they brought Carlos back in, and this time, they didn't ease into it. They came straight for his story.
Any other cameras at all? Any cameras inside?
Not that I remember. Not that I remember. My mom said something about having a camera, but I've gone back to the house, and you guys have thoroughly gone through this. When I got back there and saw, I still didn't find any cameras. The only one that I knew was already taken off the property.
So you don't just the one camera's taken off the property, you thought the one was outside the house?
Mm-hmm.
What about any ones that were inside the house?
I don't remember if there were any ones inside or not, because it's not something I care about that much. It's whatever my mom did. My mom was always very private, so most of the cameras were hidden. There's a sign that we had that says surveillance, and we had multiple cameras up at the house, but they all got weathered out and broken.
Mm-hmm.
So we just left up little lights that look like cameras, and they're all kind of hidden in the trees and stuff, where it's kind of hard to find them. So my mom was always very private with that kind of stuff.
What about cameras in the house?
I don't know.
You don't know?
No.
Sure?
Yes, it is. Those are just whatever my mom did.
Okay. So you said you don't remember, or you know there wasn't any in the house?
I don't remember, because I don't know if there were enough.
Okay.
But his memory turned out to be selective. He suddenly recalled at least one indoor camera, a small white one by the TV that faced the door, because it had once caught him sneaking a friend in late at night and gotten him in trouble. Then he pivoted to his mother's phone. He was careful to point out it had been missing from her nightstand when he found her, that everything else on her little electronics table was untouched, and that nothing in the house had been stolen. It was another detail volunteered before anyone asked for it, and right there, detectives began catching him. Denise hadn't owned one camera. She'd had 3 ADT cameras inside the home, all wired to her cell phone. But sometime just before the murder, every one of them had been unplugged and taken down. Her phone was gone too. Someone had deliberately stripped the house of anything that might have recorded what happened. Carlos may have believed that erasing the footage erased the truth. In reality, he just created the very trail that would lead detectives straight to him. They started with his phone. Investigators had already pulled a full download of the device, and when they asked what they might find on it, Carlos guessed only drug messages and complaints about his mother. He had no idea what the data was really about to reveal.
Fell asleep about an hour and a half or so?
Yeah, an hour and a half.
On your phone, there's really no dead time. Your phone's being used almost the entire time.
Yeah, it's probably stay on.
No, I mean somebody physically using it. See, the phone, the database-wise, this has come from our forensic guy.
Mm-hmm.
The phone was used, it records flips and stuff like that. Of course, every time you flip it, plug it in. Anytime you access something, every website you look at, you're looking at sports, stuff like that, just like you told us before.
Yeah.
But it shows it was active almost the entire time you were home.
Like back and forth on the house, or like just on one steady?
The detective walked him through it plainly. A phone records everything. Every app opened, every screen unlocked, every place its owner carries it. Carlos held firm that he'd been fast asleep, that the barking dogs were the first thing he remembered, but the data told a different story, and the detective was only getting started.
On phone, when you found her, she was missing. It was missing.
Correct, it wasn't there.
Okay. On your phone itself, it also tracks your GPS locations. So I can track your entire track around your yard.
Like move it?
Yes, everything. So, I mean, some of the stuff you told me is true, and some of the stuff not so true.
Like, what's up?
Like where all you went and why you're on the phone. Because you're on the phone with 911 for few minutes, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So it tracks everywhere you went the entire time you're on the phone and the entire time you weren't on the phone.
Right.
So as you said, you carry the phone with you everywhere, just like typical,
Mhm.
pretty much all young people these days don't leave without it.
So yeah, I remember.
So it tracks everywhere you went. It says you were down by the lake area
For when?
at that time while you're in that whole time frame from when you called 911 on.
I didn't go down by the lake. I could see it. I didn't go down there.
It tracks you all the way down there, GPS. I mean, it looks like a connect the dots the entire way.
Well, I don't remember being down there at all. I don't, because there's no reason from where.
Carlos denied ever going near the water, but the detective had more than a GPS map. He had a dive team. Officers had searched the entire lake behind the house, right at the spot his phone placed him, near where his family's boat was docked, and they'd pulled something out.
I know it's taken apart.
Is that the camera that's hanging up?
That was outside?
Yeah, it's facing towards the.
See, does that look familiar to you?
No, sir.
Remember the small cameras you said were in the house? This
Yeah,
camera
just
was
one.
outside of here.
Okay, then yeah, it's one of the ones that are facing towards the window.
Guess how many we found?
Okay.
How many do you think we would have found?
One?
No.
If there's only one in the house?
No, you know there's one more in the house.
No, sir, I know of one.
Did your mom show you the videos of the dogs and stuff?
Yeah, from the one that faces the door. You can see him watching outside when we roll up. You can see him barking at the door.
There's 3 cameras in the house.
Okay.
I found 3 cameras in the house. I actually found one of them.
Okay.
And then guess what else? What else do you think we could have found in the lake that day? I'm just trying to ask you, if you just to help me out here.
Yeah, I understand. And I don't know.
You don't know what else we could have found in there.
No, I'm going to assume her phone since she's on camera.
And with that, the case closed around him. 2 findings sealed it. First, his phone showed no dead time at all during the hours he claimed to have been asleep. It had been in near constant use, proving he was awake. Second, and far worse for him, was the GPS. The dive team had recovered all 3 of the home's security cameras and Denise's missing phone from the bottom of the lake. When investigators lined up the exact moment those devices went offline against the location data from Carlos's own phone, the answer was undeniable. He hadn't been sleeping in his bedroom. He'd been standing at the shoreline, at the precise spot where the evidence was later found, at the precise moment it all went dark. Faced with that, Carlos finally shifted his story. He admitted he couldn't remember the stretch between the dogs barking and finding his mother, that he'd panicked, that he'd grabbed the cameras and her phone in a daze. And then, almost buried in the ramble, came something else entirely.
Yeah, that was it. Because I
About
panicked.
3 cameras. There's total 3 cameras.
I don't remember a third one. I remember specifically one, too.
There's one on each side of the TV. And one type of thing.
Then possibly, yeah. Because I don't remember a third. I remember specifically the one that was.
So your fingerprints likely the one we have on the camera.
Yeah, mine and my mom's. Yeah. Because I panicked. I was like, I don't know what's going on. I completely panicked. I mean, what happened between me and my mom when I threw her down on the ground, and I also didn't exactly remember that either. It was kind of like just it happened. It was just boom, it happened, and all of a sudden my mom was getting up off the ground. I'm like, oh, okay, shit. I remember her last hitting me with on accident, apparently, with my car keys, and then her.
That's back with a domestic issue, correct?
Mm-hmm.
That's back in February.
Right, and then found different living situations.
That reference to a domestic issue pointed to something detectives already knew. This wasn't the first time Carlos had turned on his mother. In an earlier incident, he'd allegedly thrown Denise to the ground hard enough to cause a fracture, and from that day on, she was afraid of her own son. Court records show that fear only deepened. By May 2019, just 2 months before her death, Denise sent a chilling message to someone she trusted, asking them to look after her cat and 2 dogs if anything ever happened to her. Long before the acts, she'd already sensed she might not be safe in her own home.
You realize that doesn't make any sense for anybody to do that's totally innocent?
Yes, I do understand. So that's what's been bothering me the past 2 months, is I don't know. I don't remember. And then when I have dreams, it's playing in different ways. It's been eating away at me. Because I don't remember at all.
He retreated into that same refuge. He couldn't remember, only dreams that replayed differently each time. But then he offered detectives a new admission that cut against everything he'd told them before. He now recalled being outside at the shed and grabbing the axe that very day, sharpening it, prepping for yard work. It was meant to sound innocent. It did the opposite. Because in his first interrogation, Carlos had sworn his fingerprints would only be on the axe from chopping wood 2 days earlier. Now he was placing that same axe in his hands on the day Denise died. If he thought detectives would let the change slide, he was wrong. They were about to use it against him.
I mean, all the evidence points to you. There's nothing else.
Mhm.
That's why I'm trying to get you to help me out because
I don't remember anything. We didn't have any fights, and that's the thing. That's why I panicked the most, because I specifically remember being in the garage with the Sharpie, sharpening the axe, like getting it ready to go. I even went out to go look at the fence line, hopped the fence, looked at the tree, blah blah blah. Did all that normal routine shit. Gotta figure out, okay, where am I cutting? What am I cutting? And then what part of the fence do I have to fix? I'm a nice person, so
yeah. So everybody talk to you if you're a nice person.
yeah,
Everybody's scared to death of your temper though. Everybody.
yeah. I get that a lot. I get that. My mom's definitely.
That was the contradiction detectives kept hearing from everyone who knew him. A polite kid on the surface and a temper underneath that terrified the people closest to him. Even Denise, defending him to the end, had described a son whose anger she couldn't control. Carlos admitted the rage was real, describing how he'd beat his bare fists against a rotten tree to release it. And so, the detective offered him the story he thought Carlos wanted. Years of pressure, a mother pushing too hard, a boy finally boiling over. It was an invitation to confess. Carlos never took it. He never gave them the words, but he didn't need to. The evidence had already spoken for him. Carlos Halliwell was arrested and charged with first-degree premeditated murder. Prosecutors argued the motive came down to control and retaliation. In her final months, Denise had tightened the reins, pressing him about his grades, his future, his direction in life. Those tensions built and built until July 13th, 2019, the day Carlos snapped. In July 2021, a jury found him guilty of murdering the woman who had adopted him at 4 years old and raised him as her own. Because he was 17 at the time of the killing, he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of judicial review after 25 years. He'll first become eligible for that review in 2044 when he's in his early 40s.